The broadcast had barely begun when the atmosphere in the studio shifted. Cameras zoomed in on Barron Trump, his presence already sparking headlines before he had even spoken. For weeks, the idea that Donald Trump's youngest son would sit across from Jasmine Crockett, one of the fiercest Democratic voices in Congress, had been teased as a clash worth watching. Millions tuned in expecting sparks, but no one was prepared for what unfolded in the very first minutes. The host tried to strike a neutral tone, asking a simple question about political families and their influence. Instead of easing into the discussion, Jasmine leaned forward and delivered a line that instantly froze the air. The Trump dynasty has never been about public service, Barron. It's been about secrets. Secrets your family has fought to bury for decades. The words cut like a blade. Barron's reaction was immediate, a sharp exhale that turned into an audible scoff, but it wasn't enough to mask the tension. The studio audience murmured, sensing that this was not going to be another polite political panel. Within seconds, the clash had gone from anticipated to explosive. Viewers at home leaned closer to their screens, watching as the youngest Trump struggled to maintain composure while facing one of the most relentless critics his family had ever encountered. And before the first commercial break, Barron was already showing signs that this was not a conversation he could control. The network billed the program as a special edition about political families and power. The format was simple: a live studio audience, a single moderator, and two opposing voices given equal time. The premise sounded balanced, but the booking did all the work. Jasmine Crockett brought the edge of oversight hearings and cable clashes, a prosecutor's cadence, and a reputation for precision under pressure. Barron Trump brought the name that could pull in millions with a single mention and the curiosity factor of a figure rarely heard at length. The moderator opened with ground rules and the promise of uninterrupted answers. The control room promised fairness and the clock promised discipline. The stakes were set by the audience that tuned in not for policy, but for answers about legacy and truth. The moderator framed the hour around influence, accountability, and the line between private life and public consequence. The first question landed on Barron. What does it mean to carry a surname that shapes headlines before a sentence is spoken? He answered that a family name does not dictate character, that adulthood means owning one's words, and that he was here to speak for himself. He said that pundits confuse spectacle with sincerity, and that he would not be measured by anyone else's talking points. He added that the fixation on the Trump brand says more about media addiction than about his own choices. Jasmine entered with a counterpoint. Public power is not private property, family narratives shape voter perception, and scrutiny is not cruelty when decisions touch the country. She said that every dynasty sells a story, and that the story must be tested in daylight. She emphasized that her focus was institutional, not personal, but that blurred lines demand clear answers. She said that loyalty becomes a shield only when facts become inconvenient. The moderator pressed for definitions. What counts as fair scrutiny? Where is the boundary between rumor and record? Jasmine said the boundary is evidence and sourcing, not volume or virality. She said that the measure is consistency across the years, not a single public moment. She listed categories that always matter: financial representations, charitable promises, public statements that contradict documented outcomes, and narratives repeated after they have been corrected on air. She said that when a last name is used to open doors, the questions that follow through those doors are earned, not intrusive. Barron replied that repetition of allegations is not proof, that opinion panels launder speculation into certainty, and that his generation is tired of inherited battles. He said that he would not answer for what he did not say or do, and that he would not be baited into confessions about stories built by strangers. He argued that power brokers on both sides benefit from endless feuds, and that he would rather talk about the future than rehearse the same accusations from the past. The moderator asked Jasmine whether this was about policy or theater. She said both, because theater sells policy and policy sustains theater. She said that audiences deserve clarity about how influence travels, who profits from it, and whether the public is being sold a myth. She said that the point of the evening was to separate branding from truth, not to punish a surname. She added that if a family trades on a legacy, that legacy can be questioned in plain language. Barron asked Jasmine whether she would submit her own allies to the same standard. She said yes, and that her record shows it. She said the real test is whether a person can sit in a chair on a live broadcast and let their claims be tested without retreating into slogans. She said that everyone wants soft focus and that democracy needs hard focus. She said that the country does not need more spin, it needs sentences that survive cross-examination. The moderator promised a shift from generalities to specifics after the break and reminded everyone that the next segment would move to concrete statements made by members of the Trump circle and cross-checks against public records. The promise created a hinge in the hour. The audience knew that what came next would either confirm confidence or puncture the narrative. The network flashed the countdown graphic and the studio fell quiet, except for the expectation that the conversation was about to move from identity to evidence. The title of the program promised insight. The booking promised conflict. The next block promised a reckoning that would test composure, memory, and message under the lights. The cameras returned from the break and the moderator wasted no time. The first clip rolled on the big screen behind the guests, an old recording of Donald Trump boasting about keeping business deals in the family. The moderator asked Barron directly whether those words meant that politics and private gain were deliberately blurred. Barron shifted in his seat, insisting that his father's business talk was never policy, that bravado was being mistaken for blueprint. He said the clip was entertainment, not governance. Jasmine cut in sharply. It's not just entertainment when contracts follow, Barron. It's not harmless when charities are promised funds that never arrive. Your family has wrapped business, politics, and branding into one package and sold it as leadership. Her tone was clinical, and she leaned into specific names, citing shell companies and headlines that had documented conflicts of interest. Barron bristled, interrupting. You're repeating partisan talking points. You're not telling America anything new. His voice rose, and the audience murmured. But Jasmine did not back off. She lifted a folder from the desk, flipping it open for the cameras. These are court documents, Barron. This isn't gossip. And the truth is, for every deal that was hidden, for every promise broken, there was a family member in the room. This is not about your father alone. This is about a culture of secrecy. The moderator stepped in, urging order, but the energy in the room had already shifted. Barron's jaw tightened. He tried to turn the attack back. My family has faced more investigations than anyone else in American history, and we're still standing. Maybe the real question is why politicians like you are obsessed with us. Maybe it's because we represent something you can't control. The line drew some applause from his supporters in the audience, but Jasmine struck back instantly. No, Barron. The obsession is with accountability. You can't sell the American people a myth and then hide behind your last name. Tonight is not about control. Tonight is about exposure. And your reaction right now tells everyone watching that the exposure burns. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Social media feeds lit up in real time. The moderator tried again to regain control, but the duel had fully taken shape. Barron's composure was cracking. Jasmine's confidence was mounting. Each answer from Barron sounded more defensive. Each claim from Jasmine landed with sharper precision. By the final minutes of the segment, the debate was no longer about abstract concepts. It had become a trial of family reputation, broadcast live. The audience leaned in, bracing for where Jasmine would push next and how Barron would respond when cornered. The moderator announced that the next round would be the most direct yet, and Jasmine Crockett wasted no time claiming the floor. She held up a printed page and read aloud words attributed to a former Trump associate. The rule was simple: keep family silence at any cost, even if it meant lying on television. The studio gasped. Barron shifted uncomfortably, shaking his head, but Jasmine pressed forward. Barron, America deserves to know whether that silence is still the code you live by. Because from where I sit, silence has been the family's strongest weapon. Stronger than policy, stronger than truth. Barron leaned toward the microphone, his voice tight. That's slander. You're dragging me into stories I had nothing to do with. You're targeting me because you can't win against my father. Jasmine's reply was cold and measured. No, I'm targeting the culture of concealment that has shaped your family's rise. And the truth is, the silence is cracking tonight. The audience erupted. The moderator struggled to restore order, but the energy was slipping out of his control. Barron raised his voice, his hands trembling slightly as he spoke. You think you're brave, exposing so-called secrets? You're just feeding a media circus that thrives on tearing us apart. My family has survived every smear, every investigation, every trial by fire, and you won't be the one to break us. But Jasmine delivered the line that shifted the evening into legend. She locked eyes with him and declared, "The family secret is not that you've been attacked, Barron. The secret is that sometimes the attacks were earned." The silence that followed was suffocating. Barron's face flushed, his composure gone. He slammed back with a burst of anger. "You have no idea what you're talking about. None. You don't know what it's like to live in my family, to carry that name every day." The eruption stunned the room. The studio audience froze between shock and fascination. The control room fed the moment live to millions across the country. Commentators watching knew instantly. This was the clip that would dominate the news cycle for weeks. The climax had arrived. Jasmine's words hung in the air, and Barron's emotional outburst sealed the confrontation. What had begun as a debate was now a defining cultural flashpoint, captured in real time for a nation already polarized. The moderator, pale and rattled, tried to close the segment with neutral words, but neutrality was impossible. The clip of Barron's outburst was already being clipped, shared, and dissected online. Hashtags surged, timelines filled, and commentators sharpened their takes before the broadcast even ended. The studio audience sat in stunned silence, then broke into overlapping reactions. Some clapping for Jasmine's brutal honesty, others shouting support for Barron, as if the studio itself had split into two Americas. Jasmine spoke once more before the lights dimmed. The truth does not bow to last names, and no family, no matter how powerful, can silence the questions forever. It was less a closing remark than a verdict, delivered not to Barron alone, but to the millions watching at home. Barron, visibly shaken, muttered into his microphone, "You'll regret this. One day, you'll regret every word." The statement was raw, almost whispered, yet it echoed louder than the applause. It was not strategy. It was vulnerability, stripped bare in front of the cameras. By the time the credits rolled, the story had already moved beyond the studio. News anchors replayed the climax on loop. Panelists framed it as either a historic unmasking or an ambush on a young man carrying his father's burdens. Memes exploded across platforms, some mocking Barron's fury, others framing him as the victim of relentless political theater. The next morning, headlines screamed with polarized takes. Crockett crushes Trump legacy on live TV versus Barron stands alone against media assault. Late-night hosts sharpened their jokes, while serious analysts weighed the long-term damage to the Trump brand. Allies scrambled to defend Barron, while critics framed the moment as the inevitable unraveling of a dynasty built on image. But beyond the noise, the real weight of the evening was clear. The confrontation symbolized something larger than one family or one politician. It captured the collision of generations, the struggle between myth and exposure, the demand that public life yield to truth no matter how raw. As the country debated, one truth lingered. A single night of live television had once again revealed the fractures running through America. And whether people remembered Jasmine's piercing words or Barron's emotional eruption, the message was undeniable. Family secrets cannot remain hidden forever.